not the absence of sound. Helios Nexus never truly slept, but the kind that forms when every species in a room chooses caution over truth. The High Council chamber rose in vast, concentric tiers, filled with civilizations older than my entire history. I stood at the outer ring, human, observer, ignorable. At the center, the speaker spoke of vanishing systems. Not destroyed, removed, no debris, no signals, just absence. Ancient delegates responded as expected, measured, procedural, calm. They debated definitions while entire stars disappeared. To them, uncertainty required patience. To me, it meant something else. They weren't afraid yet. That was the problem. I watched them. Beings who had survived empires collapsing, failed to recognize the pattern. No enemy identified, no escalation authorized, just observation. Back home, we had a rule. If you don't understand the threat, assume it's worse. No one here was thinking that way, and I realized, standing there, whatever was coming, they weren't ready to survive it. The reports worsened within hours. I remained at my station as new data streamed into the chamber, each transmission colder than the last. Another system gone, then two more, not adjacent, not connected by any strategic value. The pattern wasn't expansion, it was selection. That unsettled them. It should have terrified them. A senior delegate requested projection. Space distorted above the chamber, showing the last known coordinates of a vanished system. What appeared wasn't destruction. It was damage to reality itself. Light bent incorrectly. Coordinates failed to resolve. Navigation markers drifted like they had lost meaning. One of the elder species spoke, voice tight despite centuries of discipline. This is not warfare as we understand it. No one disagreed. That was new. I stepped forward before I was acknowledged. Then stopped treating it like something you can study at a distance. The chamber shifted. Attention, mild irritation, restrained curiosity. I wasn't supposed to interrupt. I didn't wait for permission. If your fleets aren't returning, they aren't failing, they're being erased. That means whatever this is doesn't fight on your terms. A few delegates leaned forward. Most didn't. The speaker regarded me, human representative. Your species lacks experience in galactic-scale threats. Correct, I said, but we have experience with extinction risks. That earned silence. I continued. You're trying to identify the enemy before reacting. We don't do that. We assume worst case first, then adapt. A low murmur passed through the chamber, disapproval, mostly. One delegate responded, tone edged with faint amusement. You propose reaction without understanding. Primitive. Survival isn't elegant, I said. That ended the exchange. Formally, nothing changed. More probes, more observation, more time. But I could feel it now, beneath their control, beneath their certainty. Unease. They just didn't know what to do with it yet. I did, and I knew something else. By the time they understood this threat, it would already be too close. The chamber did not dismiss me openly. That would have required acknowledging I mattered. Instead, they resumed procedure, layering caution over uncertainty until it resembled control. I stepped back and watched the projections shift. Another system vanished. This time, we saw more. Not destruction, not collapse. Space itself folded inward, as if something pressed from outside reality. Stars stretched into thin lines, then disappeared without energy release. Sensors returned contradictions. Negative mass, inverted signals, coordinates pointing to nothing. Some delegates recoiled. Most held their composure. One did not. A crystalline envoy fractured slightly, its internal light flickering unevenly. This violates all conservation principles, it said, voice breaking into static tones. Such behavior is not physically permissible. It's happening, I said. That drew attention again. Less dismissive now. The speaker turned toward me. Human officer, you advocate adaptation. Explain. There it was. I stepped forward. You're trying to understand it before reacting. That's backwards. You adapt first, then learn while surviving. Silence settled. I continued. If reality itself is unstable, then your systems must assume instability as default. Sensors, navigation, hull integrity, everything. Stop relying on constants. A senior delegate responded, measured. You propose restructuring entire technological frameworks based on incomplete data. I propose not dying while you gather better data. A pause. Then faint amusement. Your species embraces chaos. No, I said. We prepare for it. They didn't accept it, but they didn't ignore it either. I saw it then. Small shifts in posture, recalculations behind controlled expressions. Doubt. It still wouldn't be enough. Not in time, because as the next projection stabilized above us, I finally understood something they hadn't. The distortion wasn't random, it was directional, and it was approaching, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time since arriving. I realized we were already inside its path. The realization settled in without urgency. That was the first human instinct that ever truly felt out of place in that chamber. Calm recognition before reaction. I stepped closer to the central projection, studying the distortion vectors as they updated in real time. They still hadn't seen it. You're mapping disappearance points individually, I said. No one responded. I wasn't recognized. I continued anyway. You should be mapping sequence. That got the speaker's attention. The projection shifted, layering previous system losses into a unified model. For a moment, the chamber remained composed. Then the pattern resolved. A line. Not straight. Nothing about it was simple, but directional. A progression through space that ignored borders, trade routes, even density clusters. It wasn't targeting value. It was moving. Silence deepened. A senior strategist spoke, voice controlled but thinner now. Projected trajectory? The system hesitated, then answered. Convergence estimate. Helios nexus. No one reacted immediately. They processed it. That was their way. I felt something colder than fear settle in my chest. Not surprise. Confirmation. You're not observing a distant phenomenon, I said quietly. You're the next point. Now they listened. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Fleet projections appeared. Defensive calculations. Evacuation models. Too slow. Too structured. Built for enemies that obeyed rules. One delegate spoke, sharper now. We require more data before committing to system-wide alteration. You don't have time for that, I replied. The speaker's gaze fixed on me. And you believe your approach solves this? No, I said. I believe it lets some of us survive it. That changed something. Not agreement, but priority. For the first time since the crisis began, the chamber shifted from observation to preparation. And still, they were preparing for impact, not for what came after. I already knew those were two different things. They escalated, but not correctly. Within minutes, Helios Nexus shifted from council chamber to command center. Strategic overlays replaced ceremonial displays. Fleet markers filled the projection space. Thousands of ships repositioning, forming defensive layers around the station. It looked impressive. It would not matter. I watched the formations build, rigid, symmetrical, optimized for known warfare. Shield lattices calibrated to absorb energy. Interception grids designed for incoming fleets. They were preparing to be attacked. That assumption was wrong. The threat isn't targeting you, I said. A few heads turned. More than before. It's not choosing you, I continued. You're just next in sequence. A military delegate responded, tone sharpened by urgency. Distinction irrelevant. Outcome identical. No, I said. If it's not targeting you, you can't deter it. You can't outmaneuver it. You can't negotiate with it. That slowed them, because that left only one option they did not like. Adaptation without understanding. The speaker addressed me again. Define your proposed adaptation. I stepped forward into full view. You stop treating space as stable. You redesign your systems to function under distortion, navigation, shielding, even biology if necessary. Assume reality will fail and build around that. Silence followed. Not dismissive this time. Uncomfortable. A senior scientist spoke carefully. You are suggesting we alter fundamental operational constants based on incomplete theory. I'm suggesting you stop depending on constants that are already breaking. The projection shifted again. The distortion wave, if it could even be called that, advanced. Closer now. Its edge was no longer abstract. Space bent visibly at its boundary, like something pressing through from the other side. For the first time, I saw it reflected in them. Fear, controlled, suppressed, but real. One delegate asked, quieter than before, and your species has prepared for this? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was simple. We prepare for things we don't understand, I said. They did not accept it. Not openly, but I saw the fracture lines form beneath their certainty. Orders were issued. More fleets, deeper sensor sweeps, layered defenses extending beyond Helios Nexus. It was movement, but still within their understanding of control. They were reinforcing the wrong assumptions. I stepped back, letting them work, watching how they thought. Every calculation they made tried to define the threat as something external. Something that could be tracked, measured, opposed. Their systems demanded a shape, a boundary, a logic. But the distortion advancing toward us didn't behave like something in space. It behaved like something replacing it. Update, a technician announced. Distortion front accelerating. That caused a shift. Subtle, but real. The projection recalibrated. The edge advanced again, faster than predicted. Stars near its boundary didn't dim. They unraveled, stretched into thin, luminous threads before vanishing. No energy spike, no residue, just removal. A strategist spoke, voice tight now. Time to contact? 17 standard hours. Too short for them, too long for me, because I knew what they would do with 17 hours. They would refine models, adjust fleets, attempt to understand, not change. The speaker turned to the chamber. All civilizations are authorized to initiate independent survival protocols. That was the first real break. Decentralization meant loss of confidence. Multiple delegates began transmitting simultaneously, orders, recalls, contingencies. The chamber filled with overlapping signals, controlled but urgent. Still structured, still too slow. I moved to the outer console and opened a private channel. Human frequency. Encrypted. No announcement. No request. Just a status packet and coordinates. Sent. No confirmation came back. It didn't need to. Behind me, the council continued preparing for impact. In front of me, the projection showed something else. The distortion wasn't just accelerating. It was adjusting. Its path bent slightly, not toward the station, toward the highest concentration of activity, toward complexity, toward us. And that was when I understood the final mistake they were making. They thought they were responding to the threat. They didn't realize they were being noticed. The chamber grew louder, but not chaotic. That was the difference. They did not panic. They intensified. Orders layered over orders. Fleets repositioning with mathematical precision. Entire civilizations shifted into coordinated defense postures within minutes. It was efficient, impressive, and completely misaligned with the threat. I watched the distortion advance again. Closer now, close enough that outer sensor arrays began failing. Not shutting down, but returning impossible data. Negative distances, recursive coordinates, signals arriving before they were sent. Reality was degrading ahead of contact. Outer ring collapse imminent, a technician reported. Navigation grids destabilizing. They responded immediately. Rerouting, recalibrating, compensating. Still trying to fix it. You can't stabilize it, I said. No one acknowledged me. I stepped forward anyway. You're treating this like system failure. It's not. The environment itself is changing. Your corrections are based on rules that no longer apply. A senior engineer turned, irritation breaking through composure. And your alternative is to abandon all known frameworks? Yes. The word landed harder than I expected. Silence followed, because they understood what that meant. Not adjustment, reconstruction. The projection flickered. For a fraction of a second, Helios Nexus itself distorted, elongated, fractured into overlapping positions before snapping back into place. A ripple passed through the station, subtle but undeniable. That got their attention. Fear sharpened. The speaker spoke, voice no longer ceremonial. Time to boundary contact? 14 hours. Less now. I exhaled slowly. Still too much time for hesitation. Not enough for transformation. I checked my channel. No reply. That was normal. Humans didn't respond quickly. We responded when we were ready. Behind me, the council escalated further, deploying autonomous fleets, activating failsafe archives, preparing evacuation contingencies they would never fully commit to. Because leaving meant admitting loss. And they were not built for that. I was. I turned back to the projection. The distortion edge pulsed, subtle, rhythmic. Not random, not chaotic. It was reacting. To movement, to energy, to complexity. Every defensive measure they deployed made it more precise, more focused, more efficient. I spoke quietly, more to myself than to them. It learns. No one heard me, or if they did, they chose not to respond. But I watched the pattern tighten, watched the path refine, watched the distance close, and I understood something they still hadn't accepted. This wasn't a force of nature. It was a process, and processes could adapt, which meant we weren't facing something we could outlast. We were facing something that would get better at ending us. No signal came back. That was expected. Human response times were selective. We didn't answer urgency. We answered readiness. I closed the channel and returned my attention to the chamber. They had begun deploying outer defense layers, autonomous constructs positioned along the projected impact vector. Thousands of them, each one broadcasting, scanning, emitting structured energy fields designed to read the distortion before contact. I watched the first layer disappear. Not destroyed, not even disrupted. It simply ceased. One moment present, the next, gone, without transition. The data feed didn't even register a loss event. It just ended. A ripple passed through the chamber. Not panic, recognition. Secondary array advancing. A strategist ordered. They doubled the density, increased signal complexity, more energy, more structure. The distortion responded. It didn't accelerate this time. It refined. The edge sharpened, less diffuse, more defined. The boundary between existence and absence became cleaner, more precise, like a tool being honed. They're feeding it, I said. That got attention. A delegate turned toward me, voice strained. Clarify. You're increasing complexity at the boundary. If it adapts, you're giving it more to work with. That is speculation. No, I said. It's observation. The projection confirmed it. Where the second defense layer engaged, the distortion didn't just pass through. It adjusted shape, contouring around the densest concentrations before consuming them first. Prioritization. That changed the room. For the first time, hesitation broke protocol. Cease outer deployments. One voice called. Negative. Another countered immediately. Withdrawal invites collapse. They argued. Not loudly, but fast. Compressed urgency. The speaker intervened. Maintain current operations. Wrong decision. I didn't say it. There was no point. Because they still believed control was possible. I checked the projection again. Distance had closed further. 13 hours. But time wasn't the variable that mattered anymore. Behavior was. And the behavior was changing. The distortion pulsed again. Stronger now. Each cycle tighter, more responsive. It wasn't just moving through space anymore. It was engaging with it. With us. I felt it then. Not physically, not exactly. Something closer to pressure behind thought. A subtle misalignment. Like my senses were slightly out of sync with reality. Around me, others reacted. Small delays in movement, micro corrections in posture. They felt it too. Internal systems reporting latency variance, a technician said. Cognitive drift within acceptable range. Acceptable. For now. I looked at the chamber. At the fleets, the systems, the ancient structures built on the assumption that the universe behaved consistently. And I understood something else. We weren't waiting for contact anymore. Contact had already begun, and the longer they kept trying to fight it, the more precisely it would learn how to erase them. The reply came without ceremony. No fleet signature, no declaration, no broadcast across council channels. Just a single human transmission routed through my private link, quiet enough to be ignored by anyone not looking for it. That was intentional. Humans did not arrive loudly. We arrived where it mattered. I didn't turn. I didn't announce it. I simply shifted my attention back to the projection and waited. Around me, the council continued adapting in the only way they knew, layering more complexity over a system that was already collapsing. They had reduced emissions. They had simplified outer defenses. They had begun withdrawing autonomous constructs. It didn't matter. The distortion no longer responded to input. It responded to existence. Internal synchronization loss increasing, a technician reported. Cross-system desynchronization at 1.2%. The number meant little to them. It meant everything to me. I felt it again. That misalignment. My hand moved, and for a fraction of a second, it occupied two positions before resolving into one. Not error. Overlap. Reality wasn't failing. It was diverging. The projection confirmed it. Ghost imprints of Helios Nexus flickered. Offset versions of the station existing for fractions of a second before collapsing into a single state. One delegate staggered. Another spoke twice in the same moment, both sentences partially true. Still, they maintained order. That was their strength. It was also their limit. You cannot stabilize divergence with synchronization, I said. This time, no one argued. The speaker's voice carried strain now. Then define survivable parameters. You don't synchronize, I said. You decouple. Confusion spread. Independent systems. Independent timing. Independent logic. Remove reliance on shared constants. That would collapse coordinated function, a scientist replied. Yes, I said, but it prevents total collapse. They understood. They just didn't want it. Because it meant abandoning unity. The projection pulsed again. Closer. The distortion no longer probed. It mapped. Energy flows. Communication paths. Movement patterns. It targeted dependence. I felt the station shift, not physically, but structurally. Alignment slipping across layers that were never meant to separate. Structural variance increasing, came the report. Within tolerance. That word again. Tolerance. They still believed failure had limits. I checked my channel. Nothing new. That was expected. Humans didn't update. We executed. Across the chamber, something changed. The oldest among them hesitated. Not visibly, but enough. They had run out of precedent. The distortion edge became visible beyond projection. Space bending, light fracturing into impossible geometry. A delegate asked quietly, time to full contact? 6 hours. Too late. Not because of time. Because of state. We were no longer preparing. We were already inside it. I stepped back. Not retreat. Positioning. Because I knew what came next. Humans wouldn't reinforce the system. We wouldn't preserve it. We would let it break, on our terms. At the far edge of the station, something shifted. Not distortion. Not collapse. Stability. Localized. Artificial. Controlled. Impossible. By their understanding. I didn't react, because that was the signal. Humans had arrived, and we hadn't come to fight the phenomenon. We had come to endure it, and redefine what survival meant inside it. They didn't see it at first. The stabilized region remained small, barely measurable against the scale of the distortion consuming the system. A thin volume of space near the outer perimeter where the laws of reality held. Not perfectly, but consistently. To the council, it registered as noise. To me, it was confirmation. I adjusted my stance slightly, watching how the distortion reacted to that pocket. It didn't consume it immediately. It flowed around it, hesitant, almost cautious, as if encountering something that did not fit its evolving model. That was new, and dangerous, because hesitation meant recognition. Localized anomaly detected, a technician reported. Unknown origin. Stability variance within acceptable parameters. They still didn't understand what they were looking at. I did. Humans hadn't reinforced reality. We had isolated it. Magnify that region, the speaker ordered. The projection zoomed in. The stabilized pocket resolved into layered structures, fields within fields, each slightly out of phase with the others. Not resisting the distortion, decoupling from it, a delegate leaned forward. Is this council technology? No one answered. Because it wasn't. I spoke. Stop scanning it. That drew immediate reaction. A senior analyst snapped back. We require data. You'll collapse it, I said. Silence followed. Not agreement. Calculation. Because they were beginning to see the pattern. Every interaction strengthened the distortion. Every measurement fed it. The speaker hesitated, then made the first correct decision since I arrived. Cease active probing of the anomaly. The scans stopped. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, the stabilized region expanded. Not rapidly, not dramatically, but measurably. That shifted the chamber. Understanding began to replace procedure. Passive observation only, the speaker added. Too late for most of their systems. But not all. I watched the distortion edge adjust again. Its movement slowing slightly near the stabilized zone. Its structure loosening. Uncertainty. For the first time, it wasn't refining. It was recalculating. Behind me, my channel flickered once more. A second message. Do not interact. I almost smiled. That was consistent. No explanations. No instructions beyond what was necessary. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because now the council faced something they had never encountered before. Not the distortion. That was already beyond them. This was worse. A method they didn't understand. A solution they didn't control. And a species they had dismissed, operating inside a crisis they couldn't even define. One delegate spoke, voice low. This is your doing. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it either. I simply watched as the stabilized region grew another fraction, and the distortion hesitated again. Because the moment they understood what we were doing, they would try to replicate it. And if they did that too soon, they wouldn't survive the attempt. So I stayed silent, and let them watch something they weren't prepared to learn from yet. They did not replicate it. That restraint, whether born from caution or uncertainty, kept them alive. The stabilized region continued expanding, not by force, but by quiet persistence. It did not resist the distortion. It existed outside the rules the distortion depended on. The council watched. For once, they did nothing. No scans, no interference, only observation. The distortion responded. Its advance slowed at the boundary. Not stopped, never stopped, but degraded. Its structure lost precision. Probing filaments reached forward, collapsed, reformed with less efficiency. It hesitated. A strategist spoke, voice tight. The anomaly is disrupting it. No, I said. It's removing what it needs to function. That distinction mattered. Interference could be overcome. Absence could not. The projection isolated the interaction. Each attempt to reach the stabilized region failed faster than the last. Trial, failure, adjustment. It was learning. But now, it was learning slower. The speaker turned toward me. Explain. I won't. Silence followed. You are withholding survival data. Yes. No explanation. Because explanation would accelerate failure. The stabilized region expanded again. Inside it, time aligned. Signals held. Structure remained consistent. Outside it, everything fractured. Distortion attempting lateral bypass, a technician reported. I watched it shift. It curved, searching for a path around the anomaly. There was none. We hadn't resisted it. We had removed the framework it relied on. A delegate whispered, it recognizes the difference. Yes, recognition meant focus. The distortion narrowed. No longer spreading, but concentrating around the anomaly. Choosing. The chamber felt it. The threat was no longer general. It was directed. At us. The stabilized region expanded again. Faster now, but still controlled. Not enough. Not yet. My channel activated. One word. Hold. I didn't move. because this phase required stillness, not action. Around me, the council began to understand the real problem, not the distortion. Us, a solution they couldn't replicate, a method they didn't control, a species acting without consensus. They had prepared for war, for collapse. They had not prepared for irrelevance. The distortion pressed closer, and for the first time, it stopped spreading. It focused, which meant the spread was over, and the next phase had begun. Because now, it was trying to understand us. They felt it before they understood it. The chamber did not move, yet something fundamental shifted beneath every system, every thought, every assumption they had built across ages. The distortion tightened further, not advancing, not retreating, compressing its focus entirely onto the stabilized region. And the region responded, not by expanding, by separating. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a slight misalignment between what was seen and what was registered. Light refracted differently across its boundary. Signals entering it returned altered, not corrupted, but translated into a framework that no longer matched the surrounding space. Anomaly divergence increasing, a technician reported. Dimensional coherence mismatch detected. They didn't understand the words they were using. I did. We're no longer in the same system, I said quietly. That drew attention immediately. The speaker's voice carried tension now. Clarify. I didn't look at him. We're still visible to you, I said. But we're no longer operating under the same conditions. The projection confirmed it. The stabilized region no longer aligned perfectly with Helios nexus. Its position overlapped, but not completely. Edges blurred, not from instability, but from separation. Two realities, partially intersecting. The distortion reacted instantly. Its structure surged, not outward, but inward, attempting to resolve the inconsistency. Branching filaments struck the boundary and collapsed, reforming faster, more aggressively. It wasn't hesitating anymore. It was adapting under pressure. Containment failing, a strategist said. No, I replied. Containment was never the goal. The stabilized region contracted slightly, not weakening, refining, removing excess overlap, reducing points of contact. That was the phase shift. We weren't holding the line. We were leaving it. The chamber felt it then, clearly this time. A sharp dissonance across perception. Some delegates faltered, their forms flickering at the edges, their signals desynchronizing from the shared environment. Fear broke through, controlled, but undeniable. What are you doing? One demanded. I answered without hesitation. Surviving somewhere else. Silence followed, heavy, final, because they understood what that meant. Not adaptation within the system. Abandonment of it. The distortion surged again, focusing entirely on the diminishing overlap. Its structure tightened, accelerating its attempts to resolve the anomaly before it fully separated. Too late. The stabilized region shifted again, further out of alignment, less visible, less reachable. The distortion struck the boundary, and failed to follow. For the first time, it lost contact. The chamber dimmed slightly, not from power loss, from absence. We were still there, but no longer fully, and the difference between those two states was the only thing keeping us alive. They saw it happen, not all at once. None of this ever was, but clearly enough that denial no longer held. The distortion did not advance. It did not adapt. It paused at the boundary, its structure tightening, recalculating, then withdrawing. Not retreat, rejection. The fragment at the edge destabilized further, collapsing into a state the council's systems could not define. It wasn't erased. It wasn't converted. It simply ceased to comply with any measurable rule. Incoherent return signature, a technician whispered. Data cannot resolve, because there was nothing left to resolve. The distortion had encountered a condition it could not process, and it had failed. The chamber remained still, but the silence was different now. Not controlled, not deliberate, uncertain. The projection struggled to maintain us. Our forms flickered, offset, layered, partially misaligned. To them, we were still present, but the connection was degrading. To us, They were already distant. Boundary integrity holding, another report came. Distortion activity reduced by 30% within local sector. Reduced, not because they had stopped it, because it had stopped itself. I watched the edge carefully. The distortion no longer pressed directly. It circled, probing at a distance, testing weaker points in the surrounding system, avoiding the anomaly entirely. Avoidance. That was new, and final. It's not engaging, a strategist said quietly. No, I replied. It learned not to. That settled into them slowly. The realization that this wasn't victory. It was exclusion. The stabilized region held firm, its structure now fully independent. No shared timing, no shared reference, no pathway left for alignment. We hadn't defended against the distortion. We had removed ourselves from its reach. My channel remained silent. No further instructions. There wouldn't be any. This phase was complete. Around me, the council began to recover, slowly, carefully, testing systems, re-establishing partial synchronization where possible. But they moved differently now, more cautiously, because they had seen something they could not replicate, a method they could not scale, a survival strategy that required abandoning everything they depended on. One delegate spoke, voice lower than before. You left the system. Yes, and if we attempt the same? I met their gaze. You won't survive the transition. No threat, no judgment, just fact. Silence followed again, heavier, because now they understood the cost. Not technological, existential. The distortion remained at a distance, present, contained not by force, but by incompatibility. It would move again, continue, seek other systems, just not this one, not anymore. The chamber dimmed slightly as projections stabilized. Crisis averted. For them, I turned back toward the fading boundary of the anomaly. We were still here, but not entirely, and that was the point. Because survival, at this scale, wasn't about winning. It was about becoming something the threat could no longer touch. The council did not celebrate. They recalibrated. Systems restarted in fragments, cautiously, as if afraid to align too quickly. Communications resumed in staggered intervals. Fleets held position, no longer advancing, no longer retreating. They had learned restraint. I remained at the boundary. What was left of it from their perspective? To me, the chamber already felt distant, like observing through a delayed reflection. You will leave? The speaker asked. Yes, no hesitation. In return? No. That answer settled heavily, because it confirmed what they feared. This wasn't a tactic, it was a divergence. Behind me, the stabilized region thinned further, reducing overlap to the minimum required for visibility. Soon, even that would end. The distortion lingered at range, no longer pressing, no longer learning. Avoiding. That was enough. I stepped back, not away, but out. And the moment I did, the connection severed. Clean, final. From their side, I was gone. From mine, I had already been leaving.